Good afternoon, goedemiddag. Let me welcome everyone to the TU Delft Library. I'm Library Program Director Vincent Salucci, and it's my privilege to introduce, thank you all coming. I know this is a big vacation week with the school, and so it's delightful to see such a packed audience. We believe we have some very exciting algorithmic art science works for you, and we'll start off with a small presentation from the artist, Katarina Petrović, and then actually Katarina has been very involved with several researchers and students at the TU, so we will call them up and have a slight discussion about collaboration and some of the projects that are TU collaborative, let's say, and then we will adjourn. We'll have a small Q&A, and then we can adjourn to the exhibition. So let me maybe begin by saying that we have a delightful photographer, Mark, in the background with the denim shirt on, and if anyone would not want their visage to appear in any photographs, then please tap him and we'll ensure that that happens. Otherwise, we are filming and photographing, so appreciate your cooperation with that. And maybe a little bit of context on this program, which is a collaborative program between myself and the Library Learning Center and my colleagues at Studium General, who are sitting across the audience, but two of the main collaborators for this particular program are sitting at the front, and you'll hear a little bit from them afterwards. They'll talk a little bit about the program. Basically, yeah, we came together, I don't know, at this point, like maybe a few months to a year ago, and said, let's do something with language, let's do something about power structures, let's think about sort of the systems that we are embedded with linguistically, culturally, politically, and how these revolve around language, science, how science is dependent upon language, how communication is dependent upon language, how language is indeed a structure that we can become ensconced and confined in to some degree, and how we actually resist this language through language, and how we conform to our language, and how we might be able to maybe react against language. And this brought to mind, actually immediately brought to mind the work of Katarina Petrović for me. And so I said to my colleagues, I said, oh, this is the time, because a few of my colleagues here that are in arts curation and myself knew of Katarina's work through the ArtScience scene in the Netherlands, and so we knew that she was working with language, we knew that she was working with algorithms, and actually negating large corpuses of text algorithmically. And so I will let her explain the nuances and details of that to you, but we just knew that it was the right time, and then we kicked off. Katarina said, oh, I always like to have a little bit of something new added to the exhibitions that we do, that we can kind of have a formative, generative piece that comes as a byproduct of working together. And so we actually reached out to QuTech, because Katarina said she really wanted to get a quantum computer to speak Old English. And I said, by all means, let's do it. And so we'll tell you a little bit more about that too. So we're unveiling a prototype work tonight too, which we're very excited about. So without too much more rambling from me, I'm going to turn it over to Katarina, but I want to give her a proper formal introduction. So Katarina Petrović is an artist and researcher working at the intersection of art, science, and humanities. Her work focuses on generative and creative processes, from meaning-making, poesis, and organizational systems to physics of sound, light, and vacuum. She creates systems, procedural works that are presented as modular installations in an online and offline space, using media such as generative text, poetry, sound, software, and performance. Katarina holds a master's degree from the ArtScience Interfaculty, Royal Conservatory, and the Royal Academy of the Arts in The Hague, and an MFA equivalent from the Academy of Fine Arts in Belgrade. She is an affiliated researcher at the Transdisciplinary Research Center Leo Apostol in Brussels, where she initiated the ArtScience Research Group and lectured at the Postgraduate School of Thinking. Katarina presents and lectures internationally and is currently working as a guest teacher at the ArtScience Interfaculty in The Hague. Katarina's recent exhibitions prior to this one, which I also am proud to posit that is the largest exhibition of her work to date. So we're very happy about that. Include The Poetics of Prompting, which some of you that attended Dutch Design Week may have saw at the MU Hybrid Space, and Approaching Zero, a solo exhibition in Belgrade. So with that, in Spain. So Katarina, please come on up. And I'm actually going to hang out with Katarina a little bit back here. So.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone. Wow, what an honor to have you all here, and what an absolute nerve-wracking situation. This is not a regular exhibition opening, right? Usually you just say, hey, the exhibition is open. Go ahead, enjoy. But so I will use this opportunity, being at the university and having a special context in which the works are presented, also as part of the larger body of work, the Language X Power, to tell you a little bit about my research and how I ended up working with language and how I developed the project Negative Poetry version 2. And then after I tell you a little bit about the backside of the works, there are my collaborators here in the audience. They will also tell how it looked for them, also from TU Delft side, but also external collaborations. So where do I begin? So I have a background in painting, actually. For 10 years, I was a fine artist, and I switched to being I was just too much of a geek. I just wanted to learn how to code, and I wanted to learn to do many different things. I ended up with ArtScience. And as part of my master graduation project, I developed a work which is Lexicon Liber Novus. Those are the works that you see in the center part of the exhibition space. So I'll just introduce a little bit. There are 7 works on view. And 6 of them are dealing with language, and the 7th work, so to speak, is also dealing with language, but it's exploring some concepts that we hold in language visually or materially. What I would really like you actually to go and see the works so that I can tell you about the works, but so I'll present them now in advance. So the first linguistic experiment that I did was, what happens if you try to define every single word in a sentence? So you try to define a word, you will end up using a set of words to explain that one word. But then you need to explain that set of words in order to explain that first word. And so ad infinitum, does it mean that if you try to explain one word, you will end up using the entire dictionary? Because you always need more words to explain the word. And the more words you use, the more of them you need. And it also relates a little bit to the Gödel's incompleteness theorem, which holds true to mathematical axiom that you always need to step out of the system in order to see that the system is complete and valid. So, like with language. And this is how my fascination begins, with these infinities in language. And we keep thinking that language is like that gives order. It is how it's said, but it's also infinitely everything else. We just chose to read it in a certain way, and we collectively agree what way we're reading it. And I thought that this kind of structure we hold upon the world, what Wittgenstein's philosophy also brings forth in the 20th century, is the language is the limit of our world. So whatever we can say is what we can think. If we can't say it, we can't build on it. It's just in the level of body of the experience. We can debate this even. So I thought about, at the same time while I was at the ArtScience interfaculty, also with Evelina and Dimitri sitting here, we did a course at the European Space Agency where literally a dream made me think about Jupiter, and it was Dimitri who said, but Jupiter is indeed emitting radio waves that can be detected on Earth, and this is how I ended up building an antenna and trying to detect Jupiter radio signals that later on end up being poetry in the 32 books of Jupiter radio emissions translated into text. And this was a bit of a, what happens if we try to subvert? You know, I'm an artist, I don't need to prove really anything, I'm just playing around. So what if we take the radio signals and we put them into language? What will Jupiter tell us? It's also to subvert the idea that so much of the world can be captured in data, in any kind of linguistic symbolical system. And from that point on, after I graduated, I was wondering about how do we explain these. How do the concepts that we hold in language now relate back to the world? So such as void or zero, things that really we don't know experientially, they don't really exist, the non-existent things in language, how do we approach them? And that's how the Negative Poetry Project started, and this is also part of the liquid crystals work, the visual work that I've developed with Professor Picken, sitting also right here. We'll talk about it a bit later. But this exhibition now for the first time shows actually the full scope of the negation projects that I have been working on. I'm so much indebted to Studio Render and Edwin also sitting here for this work, and I really look forward to taking his perspective on this. But for me, the negation was, it's really the most human thing you can do, to lie. The more intelligent you are, the better you will lie. And the same is with the machines, right? So if machines are capable of lying, deceiving us, denying truth, it means they can think a bit better than what we've taught them. So I was interested in, okay, negation is a very complex thing that happens in language, and it is so complex that although we have representation of negation in any symbolic language, we have it in mathematics, we have it in physics, the cancellation of the waves, the zero, and all of it. And in language, we have it as nothing, as void, and so forth. But only in language, the possible negative of a thing is everything else, including the thing itself. Because in language, you can say a person, but the negative of a person is a tree, a building, an image. What did we say for the podcast? We were saying what is all the possible negatives of the podcast.
Something about ants marching orders or something? Ant
propaganda?
Yeah.
Oh, propaganda. So you can think of so many possible possible negatives, but a negative of a person is also if I say person. I just put a question mark, and I already negated it because I'm doubting the statement. So no other language will allow that except human language. So to me, the human language is this very complex, very moldable material with which I work, which will also, in a way, just as any other technology we have, shape the way how we see the world. And that's it. Yeah.
Maybe I can throw you a couple questions too. You talked about the negation and sort of the complexity of it. And at one point in time, we were talking about how you were developing algorithms. Actually, the first version of the Negative Bible, which I think is good to introduce because people can see it so nicely from the audience. So maybe you could talk about like the iterations of Negative Bible from the beginning, and where they were talking about like the 9-step algorithm, and then where it is today, without getting too into Edward's territory.
Yeah. Should we invite Edward
more of the history. Actually, maybe we could have people come up one at a time. How about this?
No, it's just.
Come on up.
But yeah, so I started with the Negative Bible version 1 with a very basic algorithm, which was just word antonymization. So we have dichotomies in language, day and night, black and white, and so forth. But we don't have that for everything, right? What is the opposite of I don't know.
Sky.
Sky. I was thinking something, yeah, yeah. So antonymization only works to a certain degree, and then it doesn't. I also worked with human performers trying to negate live, and what people do with negation is super interesting. You get to know people very well with what they choose to use as a negative of a thing. So I recommend for team building, we can do negation. But the version 2 with AI is a totally different ballgame. And I had really a pleasure to work with Edwin, who has a lot of experience working with computational linguistics and AI, and you've done through Studio Render more works, which deal with that. And so maybe you can introduce the complexity of negation in AI.
And prior to that, maybe I let just...
How much time do I have?
and prior to that, let me just...
I think we have to find a way to unpack this step by step. But if I think, was it early 2000, late
23.
Yeah,
late 22.
We started. Yeah, so we started with like some initial versions, like as you described, with trying to take a text and basically at the level of a sentence, you try to understand what are the parts in the sentence, and you try to find parts in the sentence for which using like a database of like antonyms or synonyms, you try to modify this text, and that is admittedly a very like a mechanical approach to working with text, and also like the results weren't super great. Not long after we had those first versions, large language models like suddenly came into view, and yeah, we started doing some experience with those, and it's very fascinating that suddenly you have a machine that is capable of, well, I wouldn't say understand text, but it's able to work with text. And the way it works with text is by giving instructions in text. Like, well, you've all used ChatGPT by this time, so I don't have to explain how that works. But it's to someone who has the task to say, okay, here's a text, and I want to negate this text. It's a very fascinating tool where you can you have something that can, as you described, like each word in this text is connected to all of the other text that this large language model is trained on, right? So every word becomes relative, and you now have a machine that can work with that relativity. So that's super interesting. And in terms of negation, I think what it brings to the table is that you have a space in which all of these words exist, and to me it feels like you can sort of find like a plane or like an axis in this space around which you can say this is the plane on which I want to reflect or I want to negate. So right, if you like in a mathematical negation, you have a line or a plane, and you reflect over that plane, right? So to me, it feels like you can do the same thing with text now.
Yeah, because every time you're negating, you are actually choosing what of the qualities of the thing you want to negate, what of the quality you want to negate. So if I say a ball, will you negate on the roundness? Will you negate on the fact that it's to be played with? Will you negate on what of the quality of the ball? So then in large language models, you have that capacity on the quality of it, which is almost infinite, because it will choose on the proximity of all the other relationships it built around this concept. So it's also not, but it will choose, of course, that's actually the problem that later on we try to solve. It will always choose the most likely thing, which is the most boring thing. So, you know, so it will, if you say, oh, what's the negative of the ball? It will say, not ball. Or, yeah, I don't know. Then
Plain.
yeah. So
Yeah, it's also it's this, but then I think there's also if you have a text, right? So this in this text, well, like say for example the Bible, it describes like an entire world, and this world has like to an extent it has like some consistencies, and if you just start negating things in this text, then you also if you don't find like this axes like along the entire text, then you have multiple axes, and by negating you create inconsistencies, right?
or in other words, it's like you have a storyline, you have the concept of the story, which doesn't necessarily come directly in a word, but it's behind the words, what you're trying to say. And for an AI, it doesn't exist, right? So we had to find a way to kind of create this image that we want that a text to hold. And we found out that, okay, that's very, I call it image, Edwin calls it axis, but it was very difficult to do that. And especially it was difficult to keep consistency. So, because the language models will not handle large body of text, they will chunk it up. So every time it will create a new image, and you don't get sensical text in the end. Then, if I can summarize the 2 years of collaboration, it went from negating the origin of species by Darwin, which is the work you see furthest in the library, where we used all the different models of negation an AI can implement to a text. Then we found it to be very, how do you say, predictable and not consistent. So sometimes it negates well, but then the next paragraph drops off. Then we tried using images. So we did the work which is called the AI color theory, where we used a new model that embeds words together with images, so that the words are not now just in relationship to other words, but relationship to colors. And then we can negate by opposing colors rather than concepts, or yeah. And then, yeah, really, how much time do we have? and then this is the latest work, the version 2 of the negative Bible, which you can tell a little bit about the different approaches we had.
Yeah, so I think what the most successful approaches that we use here is it's like it's an idea that there's not just a single writer who, like a single writer that reads the text and rewrites it. It's actually like I constructed here like a network of agents, and I give agents tasks like, okay, read like the following 5 verses, summarize those 5 verses, negate like the consequences that you find in these verses. Then I ask a number of other agents, okay, knowing that the consequences are now this, rewrite the verses according to those new consequences. Then there is another step where there's an agent reading all those new versions, and we allow the agent to pick the best version. Then it happens that agent can actually be quite picky and says like, well, none of the rewritten stuff actually matches with the consequences that we have formulated. And in that case, you can actually ask it to, well, in that case, just come up with something yourself, which is like a really interesting step, because then it starts actually thinking of like, okay, if these consequences have changed and there's nothing in the original text that describes what is going on, you have to be creative. My experience is that these LLMs are terrible writers. So they write something and it's really bad, but you can sort of solve that by throwing more agents at it that say, okay, you have now written like 600 words while the original verse was just 20 words. Can you can you make it smaller? And then you can go on and on, rewriting it and polishing it, and checking if the text about it is actually rewritten, if that is consistent with all the other texts that have been written. So yeah, that's roughly where
and
it
we
is
also
now.
had the mid step, which was like playing with the belief systems of an AI, because this model had like a 300 facts about the world, and so you can change the belief system of the AI writing. So you're actually not on the prompt level, you're on the control vector. So you will switch the entire worldview. Okay, like really, there's so much material. It's also an unfinished work. When Edwin showed up here and we were reading, we were like, you know what we should do? We should just, it keeps going. The last thing now that we ended up with is that we realized that the actual human writing goes backwards. That the models we want them to keep writing, but a human already knows the end before it starts, right? You know what you want to write before you start writing. So in a way, it's already complete in your head, and then you work out the steps, and then you go fill it up. And we don't allow the AI to go back and forth. So actually,
maybe we should just try first reversing the order of the verses, and then ask it to negate it. Well, why didn't we try this?
yeah.
But one of the things I love about this piece, though, is that speaking of like changing the world beliefs of the AI, but it also exposes our biases and world beliefs too. So when you negate God becomes goddess, or man, woman, evil, good, you start subverting all this sort of dualistic thinking that's sort of embedded within texts like the Bible, and part of the reason why this work was like a showpiece, and we like get the big lead matrix wall and let's put it up.
Yeah, now we're at the end of the Genesis. We have only the Genesis here, but what I also found surprising in some other negation works that I've done is that actually the negative texts sound true. Like now, the goddess is saying that there will be no fish in the sea, no birds in the sky, the earth will reach a new harmony, then the celestial bodies will be dimmed. Wait, what? And it's just a simple idea of what happens if you invert a text we all collectively believed for so long.
Absolutely. And maybe it's time to bring Stephen up too, and we can keep the collaborator party going. So Stephen Picken is a professor of polymer materials at TU Delft, who's a specialist in physical structure property relationships.
Yeah, I will just switch now.
And
you can.
His recent focus is on biopolymer materials sourced from waste treatment processes. And let me really quick slide in Edwin's too, because he actually is an alum of TU Delft, a master's in computer science here, and a BA in visual arts at William de Kooning, and before he was a partner in Render Studio, who the TU Delft also is a proud collaborator with for the collection wall prototype #1. He was the lead software engineer at Lust Labs, so yeah, we're all caught up on intros.
Now I had the same question about negation, and I posed it to Stephen, who is a chemist and a physicist. And I was wondering, so how do you approach zero? What is the negation in a material? How could you ever answer that? And then what did you say, Stephen?
I don't know what I said. Negation of a material.
You actually went and you asked me, and you said, what do you mean negation? You have to explain yourself better, being a true scientist.
That's also a good answer, yeah.
And so we actually started working on a different project that we still have to do.
That's an ongoing but very slow-moving project, huh?
And it's part of the Crossing Parallels program, part of TU Delft, which brings artists and scientists together. And the idea was, of course, approaching zero in the material, but we wanted to work actually with sound and vacuum, actually using the void and the qualities of sound, properties of sound in low-pressure environments. But then while working on that, Stephen had the idea, being an expert in liquid crystals, that liquid crystals are very approachable material on understanding zero as orientation or no orientation. And when you do have orientation in crystals, they're visible. And when they go into each crystal in its own direction, which you could call zero, because there's zero order to the material, they become invisible. And that interplay...
I mean, the fascinating thing is that zero exists in many ways in physics. So if you have a solid, it has a shape, it has a definite position of all of the atoms inside the material. Whereas if you have a liquid, then the structure is lost and you can pour it and it can flow in all directions. And so the structure of a solid is some finite value, and the structure of a liquid is basically zero. So if you go from a solid to a liquid, you lose the quality. Structure is lost, it disappears into nothingness. The same occurs with a liquid crystal, where you have orientation in the liquid crystalline state, and if you elevate the temperature, then the order again disappears. So there's a point where you can say this is not a liquid crystal anymore. It's a specific moment in time, a specific moment in temperature, to be more specific. And also, if you boil water, the density of water has some finite value. If you evaporate it, then if there was no gravity, then the water would escape into outer space, never to be seen again. So then you suddenly have zero density instead of a well-defined density of 1 kilo per liter. So zero is something which occurs in that sense in real life, but it's also something which, of course, was invented by us. It's not something that the human race wasn't aware of zero, and it was even outlawed for some time as being sort of the work of the devil. So zero isn't a very good idea. Of course, nowadays, without zero, you don't even have a negative. And the point zero is the intersection between the positive and the negative, exactly with your language model. So the dividing line between these two concepts is essential.
I mean, our understanding of zero actually makes big difference to the social and cultural landscape, actually. If you think about it, we only entered capitalism, so to speak, when we invented zero sum on your budget. Your budget is only good if you have zero in the end, right? Well, before the debit and the credit, before that didn't exist. In visual arts, the moment we understood the zero perspective, we were suddenly able to represent reality more realistically. So our understandings of zero from the atomic Greeks, actually, on how you have the empty space, completely changes the way we see the world around us. Yet, it doesn't really exist. So these things that don't really exist seem to be really fundamental to seeing what does. Yeah.
And also connected to, like, I think it was interesting that this work exposes, particularly because this crystal is ubiquitous in every single one of our cell phones and screens. So somehow zero or negative is always connected to everything and infinity, and you bring out this paradox repeatedly in your work.
Yeah. We use the 5CB crystal, which
is the fruit fly of the field of liquid crystals. So it all started with this specific compound we were examining, and if you imagine a turbid liquid at room temperature, it's sort of milky, viscous fluid, and at 35.3 degrees centigrade, it suddenly becomes transparent. That's where it loses its liquid crystallinity. And so you can then use a microscope and visualize this phase transition. And Katarina made an algorithm to, shall we say, connect sound to the patterns that you see on the screen. And so I think that might be something also worth looking at.
Actually, maybe now is a good moment to just thank all my collaborators, because we have only just a part of the collaborators on this side, but specifically with the work with liquid crystals, Maurice Mikkers was helping me film the liquid crystals in 4K, which we couldn't do at the TU Delft labs. Right? Your microscopes are not made to
our
make
microscopes
films.
are no good, huh? Yeah.
And then Zeno van der Broek helped with translating digitally the signal of registered color changes into sounds. And this piece with liquid crystals you can see on the VR set, and we had the VR lab of TU Delft help us translate the film into the VR environment. I would also like to...
It's a good time to bring up Christina, right?
Yeah.
Christina, please join us.
Christina, come. And Christina is...
So, yeah, I'll handle the introduction.
Okay, go.
Christina Eno is a PhD student working with QuTech, working on quantum simulation with nuclear spins and diamond. Her work mainly focuses on emerging many-body phenomena with Floquet Hamiltonians, and her bachelor's and master's degree in physics were completed at the KIT in Germany. So, you got a woo?
And hi, Christina. Welcome.
Thank you.
So we have a new prototype work that we're unveiling today, and we have a collaboration. And Christina was our scientific sort of fact checker and educator in terms of some of the quantum information and for the simulation that we're running. So perhaps you can talk to us a little bit more about this. Either one of you?
Yeah. So I had this really weird idea that I wanted to make a quantum computer speak. But not only just speak, I wanted to speak Old English so that nobody understands it. And specifically, I've worked so much with text as characters, as modification of characters as a written text, but I somehow always thought that quantum should be in the level of speech, the murmur point of language, the possibility of a word. And then when Vincent and me came together to think about this exhibition, he's like, is there some work that we could maybe help you? I'm like, yeah, definitely, the quantum things. I could never do this by myself. So we reached out to the QuTech guys, and of course this weird idea was met with, You want to do what? Why? But I don't have to answer that. No, I'm joking. But yeah, it was a play of synchronicities or coincidences, how you want to call it. And Christina was also very curious about how would you ever do this. But then it was really beautiful that you were working on time reversal simulations, which to me was always a very interesting thing, also in relationship to zero, right? So how could you ever reverse time? If we're approaching the point of origin, we need to be able to reverse time. How does this even happen in quantum? So maybe you can tell us.
So when we first had, I think the first few meetings we had, I just told you about what I was working on, and I was working on some simulations that were trying to reverse time. That obviously doesn't happen by itself. So we are working with a quantum system that we can control very well. And in order to reverse time, we're actually just engineering kind of a pulse sequence on our system, so that it evolves with a negative Hamiltonian. So there's a lot of words in here that are maybe not familiar to everyone, but
showing the exponential nature of language required for any
yes,
kind of explanation. Back to some of the form work.
Yeah, in a sense, what we're trying to do is we have a many-body system, and we want to let it evolve and see many-body quantum phenomena. What we are trying to do is to let it evolve a certain way, in its natural way, and then let it evolve backwards. And this backward evolution can be engineered by us. And this can be also simulated on a classical computer with a finite number of qubits. And yeah, that's what we did in these sequences to get some outcome. And then later that outcome was translated onto something called a Bloch sphere. So this is a representation of the quantum state on a spherical geometry. And then that Bloch sphere is divided into equal parts that each part is part of the alphabet.
Yeah, and here I would like to mention Remer, who
Absolutely.
who was an enormous help around this. He basically carried this through. And he can also talk a little bit, but we really don't want to keep you seated. I want you to see the works. I invite you to talk with us as you go.
And Ramir was an is an IDE bachelor student, and he helped us out with a lot of the coding for this particular prototype. So invaluable contribution. Thank you, Ramir.
Essentially, what happens in the work that you can see the prototype on the big screen as part of these towers here is that we're using a quantum simulation from Christina's research group that uses a 8-qubit system that we let it evolve in a reverse every 4 milliseconds. And so the orientation of the spins, of each of 8 spins, is given as a XYZ data that this sphere, pointing at a specific part of the sphere, is then mapped onto possible letters. So every state of a qubit will give you a letter. And so if you run it long enough in a 8-qubit sequence, you will get these possibly infinite combinatorics of letters, and maybe at some point the quantum system will say something. Actually, it speaks all the time. But you'll see that.
I think maybe this is a good time for some questions, because I am sure there are some questions after the presentation.
Yeah.
Thanks, this is very interesting. I have a background in theoretical linguistics, and I'm also a bit surprised by your interpretation of the phenomenon of negation. Mm-hmm. Because in the negative Bible you work at the conceptual level, so you try to replace words or concepts with the opposite. But of course you also have negation at the predicate level, where you have the negation as an operator.
Yeah.
Like, this is a interesting meeting, this is not an interesting meeting. You also have negation at the word level, like the morphological processes like interesting, uninteresting, possible, impossible. Some of those are still productive, some have crystallized in the language. Yeah. So I'm interested in your view on that. So what's your approach, and how do you define negation as a linguistic phenomenon?
I'm not trying to define. I think I'm trying to just play around. And we did try the predicate negation, the word negation. We played with it, and actually we found out that the machine is pretty good at that. But what really the machine is not good at is understanding the concepts of a given text. And that's where we went in, actually.
And that's because language is so much more complicated than just replacing one unit by another unit, because you also have double negation.
Yeah. I'm curious what you
but maybe you can say something about it.
I think we have seen all of those. We have seen all of those things, and I think in our initial steps, we tried to work like with these like categories of negation, or these, and that felt very. For me, this feels like translating the language into like a logical system, right? And then in this logical system, you can easily do negations, right? But from my understanding of language, which is is not very big, but this translation from a language to this system of a logical system that doesn't necessarily exist. And I also wonder if it would exist, how useful is it really? Because I think the way that, as you also imply, the way that we use language, I think that the meaning of language is then the use of that language, and that's something that we can't really capture in any logical system. So in our experiments where we have tried to say, okay, we're going to rewrite this text by only finding for any object or any noun in the text, we try to replace it with something that's like the opposite of that noun, and that works locally. But if you look at like an entire text, then that easily it's not a text anymore. It's not language. We can read it, but it doesn't do anything. And
yeah, and working with negation and AI, you just see how the machines are not capable of capturing at all that fundamental quality of human language. And I doubt that they ever will, yet they do lie to us.
Another question, perhaps?
Very interesting, thanks. I was wondering on the negative Bible, if you were choosing some of the axes to which you were negating about. So did you manually make choices on how it should be told, or did you see a lot of different ones that were potential choices that would tell a different story of the negative Bible?
yeah, it's hard to really say that you can see these axes, but we have like many versions of the thing that you see there, where we try to say, okay, this is how we're gonna negate this text. And currently, a lot of the negations is around changing the consequences of the actions, right? So the actions stay the same, but their consequences, they are negated. So that's roughly where, yeah, that axis lies. And yeah, I think you can also try to do, you can try to find different things. Like you can also try to look for like the negative actions that have the same consequences. I don't think we have actually tried this, but there's also chances that this will not work as well as it is there, because for this to work, I think that large language model has to be very creative. So that means that we have to do a lot of work to make it, yeah, to guide that creativity, because again, it's really a terrible writer, yeah.
Any other questions?
And why did you decide not to use human negators? Because it seems like you're looking for a meaning in this negative Bible, and the ultimate process is negating it with the understanding the text. So why did humans?
I worked with humans before, and
So you negated?
I negated them. I'm joking.
Those computers.
No, but what you get with human negation is that you get really authorship. Whatever a human negates, that's the author. Then they become the creator and the author of that text. And with the AI, supposedly it's a non-authored text. It's all of our knowledge together. So what is done already seeded in all of our knowledge together, which then would allow the machine to translate. So that's one thing. But I also have to say I really miss working with humans in negation because they give you better answers. But So it's not excluded that it would come back. I just thought that, you know, these models have so much data already that anything we could single-handedly do will not match it. So it's like it wasn't really a choice. If we want to use good quality models, we have to go with these large language models because they're just, yeah. What would you add?
Yeah, I think there. I think it's in one of our very first conversations where we said, like, you know, there's many of these ways to negate this, and if you would see all of these negations as lines in a space, then the question was, what lies in the point where all these lines meet? What lies at the center of those points? And then I think if we used machines to make many of these negations, then the hope was that we could see that point where all these lines crossed. Mm. So that's maybe why we use machines instead of people, because we'd need a lot of people.
We would need a lot of people and a lot of time.
Still we need a lot of time to find that point.
Yeah.
Any last questions before we go see the work?
I would just like to say thank you, actually, to people who contributed to these projects, from Celine Hurke, who developed a typeface, or actually a special font that you can see in the negative Bible work, and David Teamstra, who worked on generative models that are 3D printed, standing with the books over there, and Reimer and Zeno, and collaborators here, and the collaborator. And so, yeah, and to my mentors. And so I have to also say a huge thank you to Vincent. This would not have been possible at all without your support. And huge thank you to Studium Generale and TU Delft Library. And I also have to say, the tech guys, you totally nailed it. Thank you. You bared with us.
So Marcel and Sid in the back,
it.
absolutely wonderful physical productions team. Thank you so much. We couldn't do it without you. And the New Media Center too, in the back. Thank you.
Yeah. And the final thank you is Stimuleringsfonds, without whose help I would not have been able to develop the negative poetry project. So yeah.
Well, thank everyone for coming. Katarina will be around to talk about her work, and actually, so we're gonna have a nice little reception / burl and see the exhibition works. But we also have an exciting program that's an extended version of this. So I wanted to invite up Klaas and Sanne real quick to give you a quick preview of that, and then we will go burl.
Sure, yeah. There was a slide, right? Maybe we can... Yeah, so hi. We're from Studium Generale, and together with Katarina and Vincent, we created a program for the duration of the entire spring around language and power. How language shapes realities, how we can alter that, how we can tell different stories by using other language. And we have several sessions going on, so there are some smaller sessions in the nook over there, every Tuesday, run by Klaas. But we have some other ones that we would like to highlight, and we're going to work with Katarina on March 13, which is this workshop on the screen. And we're actually... Yeah, you will be using whoever is going to join us, to actually negate text. But we're also going to invite AI and algorithms with us there. You can bring text, or we will provide text as well. So you can find it on the website of TU Delft Library, which is the next slide. The entire program for spring is on there, and it will evolve, and there will be more program coming up. And one other thing that I would like to, or maybe you would like to add, the festival coming up in March.
Yeah, so It's not visible at the bottom here, but you'll find it on the website. Studium Generale is hosting their second iteration of our Festival for Love of the World on Saturday, March 29th. Again, in the theme of language and power, we're going to have artists, philosophers, academics, scientists from the Netherlands, but also from beyond, to come show us how they play around with language, similarly to how Katarina does it, but in all of them in diverse ways. And we have a program on Monday as well in the theater. This is for the Dutch speakers here. We're inviting a storyteller from the Moluccas to tell some of the traditional stories of their island group. So it's an oral tradition that we're exploring and looking at decoloniality and how that plays into our language today. I don't want to say too much about it, but I think you'll understand the importance when you think about people like Donald Trump changing the way that we refer to different regions in the world. Canada's not a real country, the Gulf of Mexico is the Gulf of America, etc. So we're going to be exploring issues like this sociologically, how language impacts our world. I don't know. I think that's it. For the rest, I would say please explore it. There are very low-key, informal programs coming up. We would love to see you there.
And thanks again. I forgot a few little thank yous to a couple of library colleagues. Communications, absolutely crucial. Events, thank you, Esther. And also Moniz Janssen is in the back there who did the graphic design for the exhibition. So let's all go party.